You've been invited for a meal, outdoors or indoors, and you have a hot dish. And I've got here a simple little project, so you can take your food in a nice carry-all, dishes inside, keeping it nice and warm, and you can tie your strings up, pull it as tight as you like. Very old-fashioned pattern, but it works really well. And today I'm going to show you just how you can make it. Hi there, my name's Elizabeth and I like to sew smart. And today's project, as I said earlier, is a dish carrier to keep your hot dish nice and warm when you transport it. For this you will need 2 fat quarters of a nice print. I've chosen this really nice autumn look, and you will need 2/3 of a metre of tone on tone, or in my case I've chosen spot. You will need a piece of insulated wadding, and you will need 2 pieces of lightweight wadding. Now this circle will be cut from that, all of those. You will also need a piece of cord, contrasting cord. You'll need some bias binding, which has got the give in, and you will need some straight binding, which I've chosen that red for. You'll need 2 strips of thin wadding for the handles, 4 strips of your tone on tone for the handles, and the bias binding, the straight binding for the handles on the side. Your circles are going to be 16¼ inches from diagonally side to side, and I found it very hard to actually cut a circle out freehand, so I made a paper pattern. And then, because we will need to take the centerpiece out, I needed to get a 6½ inch centerpiece. So what I did, fold him there, I cut my paper pattern out, folded it into 4 pieces. That would have been, of course, joined to that like so, and I measured in 3¼ inches, because that would make it 6½ from there, there, there and there, and I cut it out, making the circle for the center. So I've cut my circle out of my pattern, and you can see I've laid this on there, I've put a chalk line around there, if you can just pan in on it a little bit and see that. Now the choice is, because this is a 3 layer, it's a top, there's the thin wadding and right side out of the bottom layer. This is going to be the top of your carrier. So either you can quilt the 3 layers together before you cut the circle, or you can cut the circle if you find it easier and then quilt out all the way around. That's for the top. For the bottom, you have right side down, 1 circle, then you have you can hear it crunching a little bit, that's the insulated wadding. On top of the insulated wadding, you will put the thin wadding, and then right side up, the top piece of fabric. For this, don't cut anything, you just quilt across any way. You can cross hatch, you can do it in star fashion, you can even do a fancy quilt on it, it really doesn't matter. So that's the bottom layer, and this is the top layer. You'll do those 2 things first. I quilted my top piece all in one. I don't use pins, I have used temporary adhesive 505. I prefer that to pins when I'm working on small pieces. What I've done after that is I cut a straight line into here. I cut round my circle, and I've also trimmed 1/8 inch back on that cut, and I've just neatened the edge down there with a machine stitch. Now this is going to be the edge that you actually put the binding on. It's where you have the opening, and you need to bind this edge and this edge first before you put the binding around the circle. I did just use a little zigzag stitch to hold my layers together on the circle there, and I have basted just roughly around the edges of the top. I've also quilted the bottom in the same way, and that's one piece, and I just roughly basted around the edges. Don't worry if you've got a little bit of rough edging at the moment, you can neaten that up in a little while. The next thing we're going to do though, before we worry about that, is I'm going to put the binding on. Now I've used flat cut binding, 2.5 inch strip, cut flat, not the bias strip where it's got the little bit of give in. And I'm going to put one piece down there and another piece on the other side, and I'm going to take it right up to the top. What you must remember is that your cord is going to go through the binding that goes around this circle, so you don't want this all bulky at the top, so keep that as neat as you can at the top, because you're going to stitch extra binding around here when you come to put binding in the circle. That will be the second thing. Straight binding on here, bias binding all the way around your circle. So I've straight stitched my binding on here with a straight cut binding. I did machine stitch it on both sides, but this, I stitched the bias binding on one side and I hand stitched it to the back. There's a reason for this, because if you come in right close, you'll see I need to have quite a tubular effect at the end. I tucked my binding in and then I hand stitched just around there to neaten off, so that that will be quite free just to take the cording in. That's a bit frayed, but you see my point. The cord needs to go through there, so you need it nice and neat. The next step is the handles, and this is one of the handles I've made up. It's just the yellow base fabric, and I've bound it with the same red that I put on there, wadding in the middle. And to do that, all you have to do is lay one of your handle pieces face down, pattern down, then you put the wadding on top of that, and get my fingers in there, and then face up with the top fabric, and then you'll take one of your strips of flat cut binding, bind down both sides. I haven't pinned, you will pin all the way down because I'm using 505, but all you have to do is secure that and then add your binding on both sides and leave it at the length that it is at 16.25. Leave that, and I'll show you how to cut it in just a moment. Lay your handles, now you stitch them, I've done them on, stitched them on both sides, they're nice and firm. Now it'll be about 1.25 inches from the outside edge and about 1 inch to the binding on the inside. You can position yours wherever you like. The most important thing now to remember is you're going to have to shape it to the circle. So pin your handle on, and when you turn it over, trim around there, but before you trim it, just stitch along that line there so that you can actually fasten the handle on before you stitch the top layer to the bottom. Now I'm going to trim off all my excess bits and pieces around the edges now, but before I put my binding on, I'm actually going to zigzag over all these layers, including the handle. I'm just going to overlock them round there because that will make it flatter and easier to put the binding on. I've machined my binding on all the way around. I didn't hand stitch on the back because I wanted a little bit extra firmness when you pick it up. I've threaded my cord through the loops just at the front there. You can see that it opens up nicely now. Any slack that you had around here, of course, gets pulled up nicely, so it's all nice and neat. I've just got to go and fetch a dish now and put it in to show you where you can take your nice hot dish when you go out next time. So this is the dish now inside here. Now, should you want to have extra insulation, you could slip one of these in. This is just an insulated table mat that I've made. I've put some embroidery on the top, but it's made with that crinkly insulated wadding, and you could lay that in the top there to keep it even warmer. So you can pull that up as tight as you want, and you just carry it with the handles. So if you've enjoyed this, then remember the pattern for this is in my Etsy shop along with all my other patterns, and I'd like you to give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you've had a good time today. And if you'd like to leave me any suggestions in the comments, please do, because if there's anything in particular you would like to see, I'd be happy to help. See you next time.